In just 6 intense minutes, Jasmine Crockett, a resilient black attorney, orchestrated a seismic shift within the federal courtroom, unearthing the true nature of a white judge right before the lenses of 3 live television cameras. The underlying question loomed. How did she turn the trial into a harrowing nightmare for the person perched in the seat of justice at the hour of 8? On that fateful morning, the federal courthouse in the Western District buzzed with an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a knife, as if even the bricks themselves sensed the crucible about to unfold. Jasmine Crockett, decked out in an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit, strode down the long hallway with unmistakable confidence. Her footsteps reverberated against the cold granite floors, each echo enhancing the sense of anticipation. Clutched tight in her hand was a heavy stack of files boldly labeled in crimson ink. State versus Lawson. Misappropriation of public funds. While she had faced down armed criminals and contended with indicted police officers in the past, today's case felt distinctly different, not because of the severity of the charges but due to the ominous presence of Howard Gates occupying the judge's seat. As she pushed open the hefty wooden door to enter the courtroom, it wasn't the jury's expectant gaze or the curious public that caught her eye first. Instead, it was the cold, calculating stare of Judge Gates, a gaze that bore into her as if he were evaluating an item lingering on a discount shelf, deeming it worthless. Without so much as a nod or a formal acknowledgement, he arched an eyebrow, merely glancing at his watch before turning back to Jasmine with an unspoken message. "Why are you here, and do you even belong?" An uncomfortable tightness formed in Jasmine's throat, not from fear but from the piercing realization that she wasn't merely walking into a courtroom. No, she was treading into a fortress of power, one that had been erected long before she set foot in it. Her eyes quickly darted to the defendant's table, where Charles Lawson, the affluent real estate mogul, conferred quietly with his attorney, seemingly unfazed as he toyed with his expensive watch. He even turned to exchange casual smiles with a well-dressed man near the prosecution bench, as if they were set to witness an inconsequential theater production. After placing the files deliberately on the table, Jasmine noticed 3 reporters seated in the back row, nodding in her direction as a camera adjusted to capture the moment. Today's session admitted the public, and each gesture, every detail she executed would be monitored closely, dissected with eager scrutiny. However, her true discomfort stemmed from an elderly woman situated in the gallery, draped in a simple, time-worn coat. Just moments ago, Jasmine had witnessed a security guard inform her that she was in the wrong seat. The woman stood, bending slightly to apologize, her expression cloaked in utter humiliation. Jasmine recognized that the white man beside her had not faced any correction, even as he overflowed from his row. It wasn't merely an inconsequential oversight, it was a profound statement of who wielded power and who, despite being present, was denied it. The heavy courtroom door slammed shut behind her with a definitive finality. There would be no retreat. Jasmine inhaled deeply, straightening her collar, and fixed her gaze on the front where the power sat, cloaked in black robes, its eyes brimming with bias. Her anger simmered quietly. The heavy courtroom door slammed shut behind her, resonating like a death knell for any chance of retreat. The sound reverberated throughout the room, binding Jasmine to the fight ahead. She took a deep breath, straightening her collar as though reinforcing the armor she needed for the daunting battle. Strategy and resolve locked in her mind, she directed her gaze forward, toward the judicial power arrayed before her, shrouded in black robes yet visibly steeped in biases and prejudices that threatened to suffocate any spark of justice. As she stood there, the tension in the room grew thick and suffocating, wrapping around her like a vice. The audience hung on the precipice of an uncertain storm, and within her chest, a simmering fire of determination began to ignite, ready to fight against the long-standing injustice that had festered in the shadows of the courtroom's facade. Today was not just another day, it was an opportunity, a chance to confront the establishment that had repeatedly silenced voices like hers. The courtroom's silence pulsed with anticipation, each beat echoing Jasmine's accelerating heart. It became patently clear to her that this was not merely about her case but rather a wider confrontation against a system so entrenched in its ways that it thrived behind a guise of order while systematically denigrating the very principles it purported to uphold. As the judge's gavel tapped lightly against his desk, Jasmine could feel the expectant weight of the room growing heavier, pressing down upon her as if demanding her immediate compliance. She noticed a subtle smirk on Judge Gates's face, revealing a self-satisfied kind of power that resonated through his posture. Standing there, the underlying tone of his arrogance was palpable, a ruling hand uninterested in justice, merely eager to keep the currents of power flowing in his favor. With the crisp, deliberate motion of a chess player contemplating the next move, Jasmine reached for the pile of court documents, the evidence of Charles Lawson's malfeasance dancing before her in her mind's eye. Every sheet of paper smelled faintly of rebellion, of her fight against the establishment. She pushed forward, placing those crucial files on the table like a stake to the ground, bold and defiant against the inertia of corruption. But before she could even begin to present her opening argument, the judge's voice sliced through the air, cold and sharp. "Miss Crockett, I truly hope we aren't about to witness another one of your emotionally charged performances," he remarked, his tone dripping with disdain. His words drummed into the silence, punctuated by the laughter of the court officers whose loyalties lay with the power dynamics established in the room. With that careless dismissal, the room crackled with an electric kind of discomfort, a collective intake of breath suffocating under the weight of an unwelcoming atmosphere. Jasmine felt the tension coiled tighter. It wasn't an emotional appeal to some imagined higher power she sought to present in that courtroom. Instead, she found herself contending against the very essence of the biases where justice was mere scenery, and truth was often overshadowed by prejudice and privilege. Every eye in the room turned toward her now, not with an inquisitive look but with a calculated gaze, waiting for her to stumble, to display even a hint of uncertainty. The defense attorney, a weary-looking man preened with an air of superiority, nodded knowingly at the judge, solidifying the air of camaraderie floating throughout the room. They were a part of a systemic injustice that contrived to dismiss her at every turn. Jasmine stood resolute, her heart pounding with the fire of righteous indignation igniting within her. She had faced adversity countless times, but this was different. Today, she was not simply advocating for one client. Her battle embodied everything she had ever fought for. She sensed the weight of collective histories, generations of those cut down by the systemic injustices that kept their voices muffled in silence. As the stenographer resumed her tapping, an unsettling rhythm echoing the drumming of Jasmine's heart, she felt the barrier of expectations closing in on her. Each click seemed a countdown to see how long she could endure the scrutiny from the judge, the defense, the local press, and the courtroom onlookers. It was not merely her trial, it was a spotlight, exposing the inner mechanisms of a judicial system resistant to change. With purpose, Jasmine lifted her chin, embodying every ounce of strength that originated from her personal and professional past. It came from every case where she had fought against an indifferent system, every time she had advocated for someone deemed unworthy simply due to the color of their skin. Those memories fueled her resolve like kindling in a brightly flickering flame. "You think you can dismiss me?" Jasmine proclaimed with newfound confidence. "Today, I am not just representing the state. I am representing all those who have suffered the indignities of a flawed system, those who have been silenced, overlooked, and office players in a theater they never chose to participate in." Her voice, fierce and steady, cut through the indifference of their dismissive laughter. Jasmine could feel the vibrations of the crowd around her, the tension shifting, drawing attention as the audience began to lean in, caught within the prevailing storm of her presence. Each heartbeat echoed the drum of her resolve, validating her position, reminding everyone within that room that she had as much right to that space as anyone else. She recognized the sacredness of truth beneath each document in the proceedings and felt their weight deepen in her hand, loaded with undeniable proof marked with the signatures of those complicit in the corruption sprawled out in front of her. For a moment, she merely stared down at the files, a sentinel of both the truth and those who had entrusted her to carry their burdens forward. The atmosphere thickened again as Jasmine turned her gaze fully upon Judge Gates. What did he truly know about justice left devoid of color? What had he sacrificed in the name of power? With steely determination, she pressed forward, lifting the first piece of evidence high enough for all to see. Your Honor, I present evidence collected from 3 independent financial agencies. Each piece details a pattern of illicit fund transfers involving our defendant, Mr. Lawson. This army of records does not lie. This, she pointed to the dense files before her, is corruption, stark and vivid. Judge Gates's immediate reaction was dismissive. Oh, Miss Crockett, spare us the statistical drudgery. His tone was snide, and Jasmine could sense the thrill of authority pulsating through him, bolstered by the adherence of those who would prefer to fail. But this was not the narrative Jasmine would accept. Her voice rang clear and insistent. This isn't just numbers, it's the lifeblood of a community being siphoned away. Every figure represents dreams unrealized, lives undermined, all for the sake of greed. Today, I intend to bring those vanishing dreams back to light. As the words left her lips, the collective hum of uncertainty rippled through the court. Jasmine was no longer just declaring her argument, she was igniting a revolution within that room, daring to speak for those who felt voiceless and urging the crowd to acknowledge the undeniable moral decay consuming all in its path. The atmosphere shifted, and Jasmine pressed her advantage, unwavering. In this courtroom, the truth cannot be mocked into silence. It will shine brighter than any facade of power you might attempt to uphold. The judge's sneer faltered for the first time, uncertainty creeping in as he met her defiant gaze. The audience shifted once more, eyes widening, realizing they were no longer passive observers in a play. Jasmine articulated each piece of evidence meticulously, highlighting the threads of corruption that tied Lawson and Gates together, unable to separate them from their unchecked power. She challenged the courtroom itself, planting seeds of courage right at the roots of injustice standing before her. This case is not just about numbers. It's about the souls these actions have affected, the community left to suffer while privilege looks the other way. As she spoke, Jasmine saw the realization dawning on some faces in the jury box. They were gradually breaking free of their apathy, shifting in their seats as if finally witnessing the truth that had long been hidden in shadows. It was a pivotal moment, an awakening, and Jasmine grasped that she had become the catalyst for change. With deep determination, she took a stand against all forms of dismissiveness, preparing to deliver the final blow that had the power to change the course of the trial, and potentially, the world beyond those marble courtroom walls. The words flowed with conviction as she approached her closing statements. Your Honor, I refuse to accept a verdict dictated by fear or tradition. Here, in the heart of justice, change is within our grasp. With that statement, a collective shift within the courtroom solidified. Jasmine reached the core of what had always been at stake, the ongoing battle between negating injustice and embracing the light of accountability. Her voice ringing with fervor, she delivered the final summation that would resonate deep within everyone present, underlining that this was not merely a legal battle but a fight for the soul of justice itself. As she left the podium, Jasmine felt the new weight of the room recalibrating. The once solid foundations of opacity that had protected Judge Gates and Charles Lawson began to tremble. The courtroom, once a definitive chamber of power, now buzzed with the energy of potential change, a visceral testament that the truth had breached its walls, no longer muffled by bias. Today, Jasmine Crockett emerged as more than just an attorney. She had transformed into a beacon of hope and resistance, sparking the fear that rippled into the hearts of the powerful, stirring the nation's recognition of its own blind spots. This was her fight, a crucial chapter in the ongoing narrative of justice, as every voice slowly began to join in her chorus. And with that, the stage had been set. Jasmine's battle was only beginning, an ongoing effort that would reverberate throughout the corridors of power, and resonate in the collective consciousness of those who dared to stand against injustice wherever it might appear. As the courtroom's atmosphere shifted with palpable anticipation, Jasmine stood resolute in her conviction. The air felt electric, charged with the possibility that she could redefine the narrative that had long favored the powerful. Every soul present seemed to lean into the intensity of the moment, aware that history was being shaped in real time. With each word she articulated, Jasmine could feel the weight of countless stories behind her. The voices of those unjustly accused, the families who had suffered at the hands of an uncaring system, and the dreams dashed for the sake of greed and corruption. It was almost as if the spirits of those she aimed to represent were rallying behind her, bolstering her courage and determination. Judge Gates, once imperious in demeanor, now bore visible signs of unease. He leaned forward, gripping the edge of his bench, as Jasmine began to dissect the layers of deceit entwined within the case. "Your Honor," she declared, "this isn't simply about one individual misappropriating funds. This is about a systemic failure that allows such actions to occur, a collective indifference that leads to injustice being perpetuated under the guise of authority." Jasmine turned her gaze to the jury, hoping to make a connection. Consider the young single mother who lost her job because construction funds meant to build affordable housing were diverted for personal gain. Or the elderly couple evicted from their home when their neighborhood was redeveloped for prime profit under shady agreements. These are real lives affected by the actions of men like Lawson and Gates, actions hidden in layers of bureaucracy and privilege. A tense murmur echoed within the gallery as her words sank in. Jasmine saw the flicker of recognition in some jurors' eyes, a spark igniting the latent empathy within them. They were beginning to grasp the weight of her argument, understanding that this trial transcended mere legalities. It was about moral accountability and demanding justice for all. As she continued, Jasmine revealed each piece of evidence meticulously, recounting the timeline of events that had led to this moment. The signature on the budget documents, which we have corroborated with timestamps, confirms that Mr. Gates authorized unlawful transfers into Mr. Lawson's shell company just days before project bids were announced. In a just world, such acts would not be treated lightly, they would warrant scrutiny and swift accountability. Every syllable escaped her lips with unyielding strength, each word fortifying her resolve and reinforcing her argument. She could feel the collective shift as the courtroom edged closer to a reckoning, one that might expose long-held truths. Suddenly, Jasmine's focus shifted as she directed a fierce look towards Lawson. "Mr. Lawson, you sit there with the aura of invincibility, but you can no longer hide behind your wealth or the defense you've constructed. Until this point, you've moved through the shadows, but now the light is upon you. Will you continue to maintain your silence, or do you have the courage to take responsibility for your actions?" The tension in the room became almost unbearable, the spectators holding their breath as if waiting for a spring to snap. Lawson's demeanor faltered at her challenge. He was no longer the composed mogul who believed he could manipulate justice as he did his investments. Instead, he sank into his chair, clenching and unclenching his fists, betraying his distress as Jasmine pressed her advantage. "This isn't merely about gathering evidence, it's a fight against a culture of complicity. When individuals like Gates wield their power irresponsibly, the very foundation upon which we stand begins to crumble, and the cracks will lead to futures forever compromised." The audience seemed to bristle at her words, and Jasmine realized that, for the first time, their eyes had been opened to the systemic failures they often ignored. She stepped forward, locking her gaze onto each juror, calling forth their collective conscience. "What I present today is an invitation to reclaim your agency. But if you are willing to acquit those with privilege and power merely because they wear the robes of authority, you become complicit. You will be the ones compounding the ingrained disparities that have persisted far too long." Jasmine's heart raced as her words held a momentous weight. She could feel the shift beneath the surface, like tectonic plates adjusting. Every listener was drawn into her fervor, igniting hopeful embers of change within their hearts. She couldn't let this momentum die. She would leverage every ounce of her audacity to propel the truth forward and forge a path to accountability. With an outstretched hand, she unveiled a final document, crucial evidence she had been building toward. "I present the original email exchange between Judge Gates and Mr. Lawson," she declared, projecting the projection onto the screen for all to see. "This correspondence explicitly details the collusion in their dealings. It encapsulates the very malfeasance we're challenging today." Gasps rippled through the audience, a wave of shock overtaking them as the magnitude of the judge's involvement gradually settled in. Jasmine felt a rush of satisfaction, but she knew this was only a step, a piece of a larger fight for justice that had to be pursued relentlessly. The judge's demeanor had shifted entirely, his composure shattered, and the anger that replaced it was like a tempest brewing within. He leaned forward aggressively, his voice booming through the hollow expanse of the courtroom. "This court will not," but Jasmine didn't allow him to finish. "This court has already allowed far too much to go unchecked," she countered before he could regain his footing. "You may wear the robe of a judge, but at the end of the day, you are a public servant. Your actions have consequences and they must be accounted for. We are here to ensure that the scales of justice find their balance." The flicker of panic ignited in Gates's eyes, and for what felt like the first time in his career, the power that had upheld him was waning. Jasmine saw it, the fragility of authority standing before her, crumbling under the weight of her words. And then, suddenly, the courtroom door swung open, startling everyone inside as two federal officers stepped forward. Their presence was commanding. The suddenness of their arrival brought the tension to a boiling point. The murmurs of the crowd reverberated like a pendulum, swinging from disbelief to anticipation. Jasmine held firm, locking her gaze onto the judge, now visibly stirred as they approached the bench to deliver the inevitable. The gravity of the situation loomed larger than any personalized fear of reprisal that might once have sent chills down her spine. Gates was no longer insulated by his title. He was vulnerable, left exposed for the world to see. "Howard Gates," one of the officers spoke, his voice steady and authoritative, "you are hereby under arrest for obstruction of justice and abuse of judicial power, among other charges." Gasps erupted in the courtroom. Chaos ensued as the audience processed the announcement. The once untouchable judge now approached by law enforcement, a stark reminder that no one was beyond accountability. Jasmine stepped back, absorbing the reality unfolding in front of her as Gates paled, his bravado faltering like a puppet whose strings had been cut. His shoulders slumped, and the confidence that once enveloped him drained away. The officers placed handcuffs on his wrists, the clinking sound echoing throughout the room like an ominous verdict. It was a moment of poetic justice, the once commanding figure now reduced to a mere criminal, shackled by the consequences of his actions. The audience, previously held captive by the powers of tradition and hierarchy, could hardly contain themselves, witnessing the unraveling of a facade that had lasted far too long. As Gates was escorted past Jasmine, their eyes briefly met, his gaze filled with disbelief and fear, a stark contrast to the arrogance he previously wore like a coat of armor. For the first time, there was no malice or contempt in his look. Instead, it was a raw recognition of defeat that seemed to resonate deeply within him. Jasmine stood still, her heart pounding, feeling the weight of history in that fleeting moment. She had not only confronted Gates but had also unearthed the systemic rot that had allowed figures like him to wield unchecked authority for so long. The room fell into a stunned silence, punctuated only by the clicking of cameras as reporters captured every detail of this unprecedented event. The air buzzed with disbelief, excitement, and a hint of hope, a certainty that change was possible, and that, against all odds, justice could be achieved. Jasmine felt the rush of energy swelling like a tidal wave, a collective relief rippling through the courtroom. She was not alone in the fight. She had transformed the atmosphere from one of complicity into one that embraced accountability, and it felt powerful. With Gates now out of the picture, the focus shifted back to Lawson, who sat frozen at the defense table, his bravado stripped away as he absorbed the full weight of the courtroom's gaze. The palpable tension replaced the fear with uncertainty. He had witnessed firsthand how the system he believed would protect him had crumbled around him. Jasmine moved toward him, her steps measured and purposeful. "Mr. Lawson," she said, her voice calm yet firm. "You've just seen what happens to those who think they can escape justice because of their wealth and connections." The tension between them crackled as she pressed on, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that left no room for evasion. "You have a choice to make. Will you continue to protect a system built on deception, or will you take this opportunity to come forward and reveal the truth about the extent of this corruption?" Lawson's face paled further, beads of sweat pooling on his forehead. The confidence he once exuded had evaporated into thin air, replaced by palpable fear. I need protection," he stammered, desperation lacing his words. It was a sound Jasmine had hoped to hear, an acknowledgement that the walls of his fortress had finally begun to crumble. "Protection?" Jasmine repeated, her tone surprisingly gentle yet resolute. "The protection you seek is within your own hands. The only way out of this is to step into the light. Name the others involved in this web of deceit, or you will find yourself following the same path that Gates now walks." With each word, Jasmine sensed the shift in power dynamic. She wasn't merely dwelling in the realm of legal processes. She was dismantling the very foundations upon which injustice had thrived. Her voice resonated throughout the courtroom, empowering other witnesses and spectators alike to recognize that they, too, could demand honesty from their representatives. "I need time," Lawson murmured, but Jasmine interrupted. "Time is a luxury you no longer possess," Jasmine asserted firmly, her voice ringing with finality. "The moment for accountability is now." She watched as Lawson's eyes darted around the courtroom, searching for any semblance of escape, any ally in a room that had transformed from a sanctuary of privilege into a battleground of truth. The tension hung thick in the air as Jasmine pressed on. "Your silence has allowed the corruption to flourish for far too long. But now, you stand at a crossroads. Will you continue to protect those who have allowed this injustice to rear its ugly head, or will you choose to be the catalyst for change?" Lawson's facade crumbled, revealing the depth of his fear. "I'll talk," he finally blurted, his voice a whisper, a mere echo of the confident mogul he once was. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, knowing he could no longer conceal the truth from the piercing light Jasmine had cast upon it. "Good," Jasmine replied, allowing a moment of silence to settle in, letting her words take root in the minds of everyone present. "We will ensure your safety in exchange for your cooperation, but know that your confession must be thorough and honest. This is about more than just saving yourself. This is about dismantling the corrosive culture that has taken root in our system." As she stepped back, the eyes of the courtroom shifted from Lawson to Jasmine, witnessing her transformation from an attorney representing a singular case into a driving force for systemic change. She had become a figure embodying resilience, the embodiment of a voice long silenced by the weight of prejudice and power. An officer approached, indicating they were ready to take Lawson into custody under protective measures. "You'll be treated fairly," the officer assured him, but the look of despair registered unmistakably in Lawson's expression. He now faced the repercussion of his choices and had unwittingly become a pawn in the grander scheme of justice. With Lawson being led away, the focus returned to Jasmine. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the battle she had waged. The courtroom felt alive with a sense of purpose, the eclipsing shadows of power beginning to unravel in the wake of transparency that had swept through. "This trial is just the beginning," she declared to the jury and onlookers, her voice steady. What we have witnessed today is one example of the pervasive corruption poisoning as authority. Reform is not a passive endeavor, nor is it something that will be handed down from above. It requires that we take a stand, demanding integrity from every corner of our judicial system and ensuring those with voices like ours are heard. Seated in the gallery were members of the community, their eyes glistening with tears of hope and resolve. They had witnessed at that moment an awakening, a demand for action resonating from every corner of the room. Jasmine saw the faces of those who had fought against the tide for far too long, and she felt the rush of solidarity lifting her spirit. As she prepared to relinquish her place at the podium, Jasmine knew the fight was far from over. Each victory was a thread weaving an intricate tapestry of justice, and her role would extend far beyond this trial. She felt the weight of countless advocates watching and bearing witness to the unfolding changes, a network of individuals prepared to rise against injustice every step of the way. Determined to continue her fight, Jasmine approached the microphones, ready to address not only the room but the broader audience tuning in via television and online broadcasts. Dear people of our nation, it's crucial for you to understand that your role is not diminished simply because you are not standing in this courtroom. Each of us holds the power to bring about change through our voices, our actions, and our insistence on justice. As her words rang out, the camera zoomed in, capturing every flicker of passion in her eyes. We must raise our voices together, stand in solidarity, and demand accountability from all institutions, not only those cloaked in judicial robes. We have the power to dismantle this broken system and rebuild it on the principles of integrity, transparency, and equity. Applause erupted throughout the courtroom, not the loud, boisterous applause of a campaign rally, but a subdued yet powerful acknowledgement of the shared understanding among those present. With every heartbeat resonating in harmony, Jasmine felt the overwhelming sense of support wrap around her like a protective embrace, each person affirming that the struggle for justice was rooted in communal action. As the audience absorbed her message and responded with fervent support, Jasmine pictured the consequences of her words extending even further. She envisioned young black girls like the one in her mind, standing in their own living rooms, gazing at the television screen, inspired by the grit and determination poured from her presence. Those girls, alongside their families and communities, would awaken to the profound understanding that they too could claim their right to justice. The moment she had sparked in the courtroom transcended the confines of that space. It reached far beyond the walls of the courthouse, spiraling into the hearts of countless viewers nationwide. Each story of injustice, each encounter with discrimination, began to bubble beneath the surface, prepared to rise through communal defiance. Jasmine stood at the precipice, her heart racing as she seized the microphone one last time. We will not let the cries for justice fall silent. Join me in this mission. Join me in demanding that we create a world where justice is not just an ideal but a reality. A world where the voices once silenced will be lifted, and where accountability will be demanded from those who wield power. And with that, something changed within the very fabric of the tradition-laden courthouse, the atmosphere thick with the promise of change. Justice no longer relegated to whispers but coming alive in the full light of day. As Jasmine stepped back, the applause reverberated, each clap echoing the heartbeats of those standing beside her in the fight for truth, filling the air with renewed momentum for the challenges yet to come. In that moment, Jasmine Crockett recognized she had ignited something extraordinary. A movement, not confined to the four walls of a courtroom but blossoming in the hearts of those yearning for justice. And as she turned to exit the courtroom, she vowed to carry this momentum forward, ensuring her fight continued, determined to transform the repressive silence into a thunderous roar demanding justice for all.